Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, The Big If by Lilah Burke of Inside Higher Education. Mark and Anika will be discussing Chapter 118, What is a Pell Grant, and who gets them? Our question from a listener is from Eric from Colorado. How much should I, as a parent, be involved in selecting the colleges my child applies to? Our interview is part 2 with Vincent Garcia on understanding the 23 schools in the Cal State University system. And our college spotlight are the Wildcats of the University of Arizona.
Okay, friends, quite a few announcements this week. Special thanks to everyone for sending us all these great articles for our In the News section, advice for our recommended resource section, and college spotlight ideas that you want me to do a deep dive in. And so continue to send your great ideas. We read every one of those emails, and we are most grateful. Friends, the dominoes continue to fall as more and more schools go test optional. This week, the first Ivy League school went test optional. And it's something I've actually been debating for almost 10 years now. Which Ivy will be the first to go test optional? It's just a matter of time. And so I have to give a huge shout out to Julia Esquivel, one of the best college counselors I know of in the country. Julia is at Milton Academy in the Boston area. And I've had 5 students at Milton in the 2019 and the 2020 class. So we co-counsel with their entire team. And it is the finest staff of college counselors of any high school in the country I know of. So you're looking for a high school with unbelievable college counseling. I know of no better place than Milton. But I've had this ongoing debate with Julia and Susan Tree, who you may recall, our regular listeners, was on our podcast as well, about which Ivy would be the first to go test optional. And Susan was voted for Dartmouth because their Dean of Admissions, Lee Coffin, came from Connecticut College, which was test optional. So we brought that test optional background in. And I've stuck to my gun saying it would be Brown. And Julia Esquivel said it would be Cornell. So huge shout out to Julia for nailing that one. And good thing that I don't bet. I would be out some cash, Dave.
That's right.
By the way, Julia is a former admission officer at Haverford and an admissions reader at Emory. And she will be joining a former admission officer from Pomona for an interview that will happen on our podcast a little later in 2020 that I'm really excited about. We're going to talk about what I wish I knew when I was in admissions. So there'll be 2 former admissions officers who are now doing college counseling. We're going to share the things that they would do totally differently now that they kind of understand high schoolers more. So look for that interview later in 2020. Now, we're going to have 2 recommended resources this week. I'll get to that later. But all these test optional schools, I'm going to give you a fantastic place that's updating them every single day if you want to keep track of them. But in addition to Cornell, some of the changes this week, and I'm not going to be doing this every week now that we're going to have this link, but for this week, I'll do it again. Barry University, permanently going test optional. Butler, permanently. California Lutheran University, permanently. Loyola Marymount, 1-year experiment. St. Olaf, who we've had on the show, permanently. Tulane, 1-year experiment. Virginia Tech, huge national university, 1-year experiment. Friends, thanks for all of your emails. Dave, comment on all the emails because I forward them to you all the time. What can you say about the emails that we get from our listeners?
Well, first of all, they're incredibly encouraging. And I don't think people who write emails truly understand the real impact they have on us as the podcast producers and everybody involved in the show. They are so encouraging. It's great to get the real-time feedback. We take everything you say incredibly seriously. When you refer us articles, they're fantastic articles. When you give comments about our content, we use that to further improve our content. When you make offers of cookies, Mary, yes, I am looking forward to your oatmeal. You sent me a picture of the cookie.
I know. Didn't that make you hungry? I saw that.
It did.
Because I like oatmeal raisin too.
Mary, I am putting you in my map quest. Next time I'm in your area, I'm coming for that cookie. So thank you so much. So I just want to really continue to express my appreciation. I know Mark appreciates it and Anika appreciates it. We just love the emails.
Absolutely. Friends, God has a sense of humor. So if you heard episode 117, Dave and I discussed a great article, which in essence says test optional does not mean test blind. And at the time we discussed that article, Hampshire College was the only test blind school in the country. Before that, Sarah Lawrence had been test blind back in 2012, but they changed their policy and went to test optional. And by test, you know what I mean by test blind, Dave?
Yes. Basically, test blind means they don't look at any scores at all. Is that correct? Or
correct. Like they won't consider your scores. Like
that's right. It's like
no factor at all.
That's
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So just then, 5 days ago, the CSU system, the California State University system, the biggest public school systems in the country, what we're featuring right now for 4 episodes in a row with Vincent Garcia, announced not only is it going test optional, but it will be going test blind for the remaining applicants for 2020, 2021, and some semesters into 2022. So all I can say is, 1, God has a sense of humor. 2, you're going to hear 3 more parts of the interview with Vincent Garcia. And one of the things we get into is how CSU schools, evaluate applicants. And just keep in mind that the part about test scores, that's at least not going to apply for this class 2021 and some classes in 2022. You just had no way in the world of knowing COVID-19 would flare up and would cause the CSU schools to not only go test optional, but go test blind. So that's just a little God has a sense of humor thing there.
Wow, that's amazing. So you're saying that with the CSU systems, they don't even want you to send in the scores. They're going to pretend like those scores don't even exist.
Correct. For remaining applicants for 2020, 2021, and some semesters in 2022.
Wow.
And so this is a huge decision because literally small little Hampshire College, 1,000 students, was the only school in the country to truly, truly be test blind, So it's a big announcement. I mean, you're talking about one of the largest systems in the country. So that was a rocket. That was a bomb. That was going beyond just test optional. And so we'll see what happens. What'll be most interesting is whether they continue with that policy. Right. After we get through this period, that's what's going to be actually interesting for all these test optional schools. They can continue with these policies or they're going to go back. And so we'll definitely be discussing that on this podcast. But the truth of the matter is they don't even know right now. So we can't go there.
Well, and, I was reminded after our podcast that, Mark and I both grew up in Canada, and Canada's test blind. University of Toronto, McGill University, University of British Columbia, world-class universities. There is no national testing system that they do. Now, if you're a U.S. graduate from a high school, they do require your SAT scores to some degree. But if you're Canadian, they do not. And they manage to pick very competitive classes, even though they have a diversity of high school experiences as well. So, these are radical experiences that the United States schools are going through right now. But there's a model out there through almost the rest of the developed world that you do not necessarily need testing to get a very competitive and accurately reflective class. So,
hey, Dave, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I went and took the SAT together.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. It was a huge auditorium because I was one of these people who just took it one time. I don't know if you took it multiple times.
No, I think I just took it once too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember we went together in Toronto, this huge auditorium.
Yeah.
And it was like, it felt like there were hundreds of people in there.
That's right.
Because you still have people that are going to U.S. schools like Dave and I were. Yeah. And it's so funny. I had this memory for numbers because I still remember exactly the score you got and the score I got. And guess what? You beat me. I'm competitive.
Man, I buried that thing.
That's so funny.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, I don't. I can't even remember my MCAT score. They've changed the MCAT about 3 times since I've graduated, so. But
well, this would have been literally 1981.
1981,
So it's 39 years ago. Is that crazy?
Yeah, but I think the admission rate to Princeton was like 20%. So, and to put it
you're
in
being
context,
humble.
no, to put it into context, when I went to started residency at the University of Chicago, which was about 1993, I distinctly remember the admission rate to University of Chicago was 70%. Because it was a very self-selected.
Well, let's not even get started about that because Chicago's I remember when I first was doing college counseling, their admission rate was in the mid to high 30s. So anyway, it's changed a lot out there.
That's right.
Final announcement. Going to be real transparent with everyone. So Anika and I, when we started Your College Bound Kid, our goals, we wanted to have a commercial-free podcast, and we wanted to be the most comprehensive college admissions podcast in the world. And so we have been commercial free now for all 118 episodes, delivering 8 hours a month of content. And you can decide if we're the most comprehensive college admissions podcast in the world or not, but that's our goal. But it costs a decent amount of money for this podcast. It actually costs about $10,000 a year for us to pay all our subscription services, equipment. And we do have 6 contractors, and not employees, but contractors with the webmaster and the sound engineer. They're probably almost 6,000 of that 10,000 that we pay. But thanks to the generous donations from 53 of you, or podcast partners, some of you give monthly, some quarterly, some one time. We actually get 53% of that 10,000 in donations, or about 5,300. And we are deeply, deeply moved. Anytime you use your hard-earned money and send us a gift to show us you support us, it means the world to us. That's the only thing, Dave, that's more encouraging to me than an email. It's like someone actually taking their hard-earned money and saying that they want to either show their support or help us with our expenses. It's just, I'm not a crier, but I've had a little teary eye a couple times. And so our goal really is to get all of our expenses covered through donations, so that right now we've been coming out of pocket $4,700 a year. So we're hoping to be able to do that. And we're going to incentivize you if you're interested in supporting us, either to encourage us, or you want us to keep producing this content. But also we have an idea, which we've been enacted for a while, which is to give bonus content once a month to our donors. But moving forward, it won't just be me. Dave and I are going to do some things together, and we've got some kind of exciting things lined up. One is a debate over whether this movement of pass-fail during COVID is a good idea. I'm not going to tell you who's taking what side, but I'll tell you, this is not a thing where we're just taking different positions for the sake of debate. We have different opinions on this. And so we're going to talk about that. And then we're also going to talk about what's the most important thing that 20-year-olds should be doing to master right now. So that's some of the content that we've got coming up end of April, May, and a gift of any amount. And you will not only get this content, but you'll get our content in perpetuity. So if you're interested in supporting us, it would mean the world to us. Just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, click the donate button. We will forever be grateful. Don't like to bring money up a lot, but just want to be really honest with you every now and then and just be really transparent with you about our needs. And something else I remember about debating you, Dave?
What's that, Mark?
You finished 6th in all of Ontario, and you were ranked 6th in debating your last year of high school. I remember that. Did you remember that?
Yeah, we love to argue. That's right.
I'm talking about you. You finished, it was either 6th in Canada or all of Ontario. You were ranked as a debater.
That's right. I just missed out on going to the Canadian Nationals. So I do remember that. So, and in fact, not to get off on an aside, but both Dave and I both feel like your debating was one of the biggest hooks that got you in Princeton. Wouldn't you agree, Dave? It was certainly was a factor. Certainly was a factor. And in fact, the interesting thing was all the gentlemen that beat me, they ended up going to Harvard.
Hey, so you just went there for med school anyway.
That's right.
Take that.
That's right. But it was great fun.
Yeah, good memories. See, I wondered if you remembered you were
I
6th.
don't, man. You know what? After talking to you, I'm going to get my memory checked because I was like, man, this brother has remembered everything. I must have early dementia.
If you ever want to know what your SAT score was, I'll tell you. No, I remember that too.
That's right.
I'm competitive, so that one stuck with me.
No, we
won't put that one out on the air, but I'll say that you did for a guy being humble, you crushed it. You did very well, Dave.
Well, thank you, my friend. I still forgot it.
All right. So for our admission tip for the week, A lot of what I'm doing right now with students, a lot of them is helping them to appeal their aid awards. It's a huge part of what I'm doing right now, as well as advising people on whether to take gap years. Those are two of the big things that I'm doing with my students, both my school students and my private clients. And here's a little tip. When it comes to appealing an aid award, don't use the word negotiate. It surprises me how many times I hear actually very experienced admissions people when they do seminars and workshops and things on how to appeal an aid award, and they use the word negotiate. This may just seem like semantics, but the word negotiate is like nails on a chalkboard to financial aid people. I mean, even for me, I never did financial aid, but I had many conversations with financial aid when I did admissions about how they hate it when somebody used the word negotiate. It feels used car salesperson. That's not how they see themselves. So what are some alternatives? I'll give you 3 good ones. You can ask a school to reevaluate your aid offer. That's good language. You could ask for professional judgment based on special circumstances. That's a good option. Or you can request for a reconsideration of your award. Those are all appropriate terminologies. Don't say, I want to negotiate. And for our admissions vernacular, the word is assured admissions. Want to take a guess on that one, Dave, or not?
Assured, as in, like you've got a guarantee?
Yep, that's it. That's it. So a lot of times you'll hear me call it admissions by the numbers. I've referred to it as formulaic admissions. Sometimes it's actually called guaranteed admissions, but that's another term that is out there, assured admissions. And one of the things I'm going to do on this section, I'm going to start to differentiate between terms that I have heard admissions officers use only amongst themselves, talking about the process, versus ones they actually use when they're talking to students. Assured admissions is a term, it's a ladder. It's one that you'll hear schools say, information sessions, conversations with students. And actually our college spotlight is on University of Arizona this week, and it is a term that they frequently use, assured admissions. Dave, you're on the front lines of the battle in New Jersey. Give us an update on what's going on with COVID-19 and work these days, in your 12-hour shifts every day.
Well,
of which, by the way, just so you know how committed Dave is, I'm just going to share this with our audience. Dave worked last night 7 to 7, 12-hour shift to 7 a.m. He gets off at 7 a.m. and we're recording this podcast in the morning, Saturday morning after a 12-hour shift. So cut him some slack if he stutters a little.
If I look a little goofy.
Snores.
No. Well, the good news is it's my last run of 4, and I get the afternoon off before I go back in the morning. So it's always nice to end a run of night shifts. The good news on the COVID front is we have definitely plateaued, and I think we are seeing lights at the end of the tunnel, at least in the New York, New Jersey area. Our census is still high, but clearly we're not seeing quite the same number of new diagnoses and inpatients and fatalities as we had in the past. So we are quite hopeful that within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we shall see the tail of this. Now, we still have concerns about a reoccurrence, and we are now in the process of gathering data on the virus. There's been some interesting prevalence studies that have come out that indicate that the prevalence of the virus might be up to 10 times higher than we previously thought. In other words, a whole lot more people are walking around asymptomatic, and the amount of people that actually have antibodies may be anywhere from 5 to 10 to maybe even 15%, depending on the area of the population. So on the one hand, it's good. It means that the actual fatality of the virus is far less than we thought. But on the other hand, it's a little concerning because it shows you that the virus is far more contagious, and that in fact, we might have still upwards of 80-90% of the population that are still at risk. So these are just interesting studies that are coming out. There was a review of the very scant data that came out of China for the antiviral remdesivir. That's the Gilead drug that was hinted at by a University of Chicago study as being potentially very helpful. That was not quite as optimistic, but once again, all that data is incredibly preliminary. So we're still in data gathering. Hopefully we have some antivirals on the market. We do have phase 1 vaccine testing in place. Many people are optimistic that within a year we may have an effective virus, but that still is very speculative. And I'm hopeful that we'll start opening up the country, if not in mid-May, by the end of May, and that we can get back on our feet, hopefully, by June and July. What's your thoughts, Mark?
I have the most important question. Are you seeing any loud, obnoxious, boisterous drunks anymore? Or is it all 100% COVID in the emergency room?
You know, the other night I went searching for my buddy. I said, my drunken buddy, where are you? So the regular partiers have yet to reemerge, but I'm hopeful we'll see them soon. You know, it's a bad pandemic when the Saturday night crowd does not come into the hospital. It's like, we may be drunk, but we ain't crazy. We ain't going to the hospital. So we're ways off from that, but I hope so.
That's great. Let's get into the big if.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, the big if. This is a great article, The Big If by Lilah Burke of Inside Higher Education. Now, I'm going to start the article with the quote they ended on. It's a great quote.
Oh, wasn't that great, Dave?
That's right.
I was going to read that too.
That's right.
That was the best quote. Go ahead and share it.
Okay, if you haven't heard, it's by the great American pugilistic philosopher, Mike Tyson. And it is, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. And boy, have we been punched in the face with COVID. In fact, in many ways, the blows keep on coming. And the point that we're going to, the big if is about what is college going to look like in the fall and what are colleges going to do. And it discussed really 4 different scenarios out of a possible 15 that were mentioned. But it ended the article with, these are all plans, but the bottom line is we may get punched in the face again with this virus in the fall, and then the best laid plans often don't work out. So let's get into the article. The article really started, they discussed some 15 possible scenarios that were mentioned by Joshua Kim and Ed Mulvaney of Dartmouth and Georgetown University. And they had done a blog where they said, what are the 15 different possibilities for colleges opening up? And what this article did is it narrowed it to the top 4 and 5. So I'm going to throw each possibility out to you, Mark, and then we're going to discuss them one by one. So the first possibility is, number 1, that colleges actually continue to do online education, such as Cal Fullerton and San Jose State, at least for a period of time. And what's your sense with that first possibility, Mark?
Yeah, and the main thing, there's a couple things I want to say before, a little preamble before we get into this. So for those of you who are regular listeners of our podcast, we, at the very end of 116, which is just 2 episodes ago, we kind of editorialized for about 20 minutes. Dave and I both speculating what we think will happen, giving our opinions. And so in a lot of ways, you may think, well, why are you coming back to it again? And the reason why is because this is the biggest question that I'm getting as a counselor. And I also am on a lot of webinars and information sessions every week. Some of them are some of them are exclusively for counselors and some of them are not. And this is the question. This is like the elephant in the room. And so it just kind of behooves us. Like, I've kind of learned I can sort of use as a pulse for where people are at. Like, what questions am I constantly being asked, both by private clients and by my KIPP students? And this is it. And so we know that's this is on your mind. And then on top of that, this great article came out. Now, the thing about this article is all these different scenarios that Dave's going over, different schools. And so this isn't a matter of sort of listening to the 4 and which one is everybody going to do. No, there will be swaths of school that will implement each of these 4. And there's one thing that's become really apparent to me from being on these information sessions. And also I do have individual conversations, just one-on-one directly with admissions officers every week as well, as there are completely different perspectives that are going to be taken by different schools. And sometimes it has to do with the political climate in the environment. Sometimes it has, like red state, blue state, who's the governor, what their perspective is. Sometimes it has to do with the financial pressure that the school is under. Sometimes it has to do with just how much of an outbreak of COVID they've had in their area. There's lots of factors that determine it. So I just wanted to say that. I know it's a lot of preamble, but I just want to let everybody know, like, all of these 4 options that Dave is saying, they will be used by different schools.
Right.
So Dave's referring to the fact that 2 universities in the Cal State University system, San Jose State and Cal State Fullerton, have been very open about considering and planning for a fall semester online. They've come right out about it. They've said nothing's set in stone, but they're getting everything in order for a possible virtual semester.
Right.
And, this is tricky what I'm going to say because it's very nuanced, but in some cases, there's less pressure on public schools than private because of the backing that you still have from the tax system.
Right.
And so that's just one thing that I want to say there. But take it away. What else you want to share, Dave? There's so much more we have in here. I know we got lots to get to.
Well, I'm going to segue into that because in the discussion about which schools will go online, they quoted a gentleman called Chuck Steuben, who was the former president of the University of Idaho. And he made the point that it's much more likely that private institutions are going to try and open up in person and not online because private institutions are extremely tuition dependent. And he said, quote, "I think that they will be under a lot of pressure to have face-to-face classes rather than online because of the student dissatisfaction with paying normal tuition for online classes." And also when he talked about this whole online versus face-to-face, he pointed out that there's a real split between colleges that are urban-based, such as San Jose State and Cal Fullerton, and more rural colleges, such as Missouri, because, of course, the impact of COVID was that much greater in the urban environments. So let me pause and see your thoughts with that.
No, I think you nailed it. I think the density is a factor for sure.
Yeah.
The politics of the area is also a factor.
Yeah.
Those are absolutely factors. And we're gonna try to convey the nuance here because I don't know if it's your next point, but I know you're going to share about some other public schools that are planning on opening in the fall. You want to transition to that?
Sure. Okay. Well, the public schools that they were talking about were mostly Purdue, and they talked about William Jared College, and they were quite adamant that they were opening in the fall. And to segue into that, another nuance that they brought out was that there clearly is also sort of a red state, blue state political divide in all this, and that you're starting to see much more acceptance, and not understandably so, in the colleges that may be more Republican or Southern, like Georgia, in their openness to open in the fall, because these are the same states that are trying to open up early right now in terms of hair salons and so forth. So why wouldn't they be more open to opening up their colleges? Whereas in Illinois, for example, which has just announced that it's going to extend the lockdown until the end of May, you're seeing a lot more reticence on those colleges to commit to opening up face-to-face.
Yeah, definitely. So Purdue University President Mitch Daniels sent a letter to university constituents this week explaining the administration is looking at separating people by age and vulnerability and limiting class sizes in the fall. He didn't mention the idea of at all in his letter of an online education, but he did go on to say this: the virus poses a near zero lethal threat to the under 35 age, which makes up 85% of our population. Yeah. And one of the colleges I met with this week in a special counselor forum was the University of Nebraska, and they made it very clear that they fully intend to open in the fall. They would be shocked if they did anything different than that. Now, I know we said before that sometimes there's difference between public and private financially. It's a lot more nuanced than that. So there are a lot of schools out here where the college is the primary driver of the economy, and almost all the jobs revolve around the college. Let's take University of Georgia, where my daughter goes to school. Athens is completely dominated by University of Georgia. Anywhere you go, any apartment in all of Athens is usually 90% or more college students, either PhD, master's, or undergraduate students. The restaurants, everything. And what that puts unbelievable pressure on governors in those states, mayors, everybody to push for schools to open. So I'd be shocked if UGA is not open. Now, a lot of it depends on this, I'm sorry, I'm going to give my opinion, crazy experiment that George is doing right now with opening tattoo parlors and massage therapists and barbers and nail salons and everything else. Like, don't even get me started on that. But if that backfires and boomerangs in a way that, each partisan side can't just sort of spin it as a success or failure based on their political leanings, then that's, of course, these things can always be revisited. But I definitely think political leanings of the leadership of the state absolutely play a big role in how a lot of these decisions are being made. But so does the economy and the pressure. What do you have next, Dave? You had a couple other points you wanted to make.
I did. Well, I did want to make one comment on Mitch Daniels' comment that the virus poses a zero lethal threat. I thought that was rather presumptive for a college university president to make that at this stage of the game. It is true.
You mean because he's not a medical expert and infectious disease specialist? You say?
Correct, and we don't know. Well, what we do know, it is true that the virus is much more lethal to the older age group. But what we also true, and I can also tell you from personal experience, that there are certain segments of the young population that are vulnerable, particularly kids who are asthmatics, kids who might have autoimmune disorders like lupus, who might be on prednisone, kids who might have other underlying disease states. So to say it's a zero lethal threat, I think, is an overstatement. And I can tell you that if a college opens up and one or two of their students has an extreme adverse income because he catches COVID at that university, I think there would be significant liability attached to that. So I just want to put a caveat to that comment because I think it may prove to be somewhat presumptuous.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's his opinion, and it's not necessarily opinion shared by everybody.
Right. Okay, but going on, let's talk about some of the other plans. Now, it mentioned two plans they threw out there, but they did not give a good explanation for what they meant by that. So they talked about a hybrid semester. Mark, what is a hybrid semester?
Yeah, so hybrid is a combination of online and in person.
Right.
And so it'd be some scenario where maybe, the details, of course, need to be worked out in regard to that, but it could be you come to campus for a couple weeks and then you go back to online and maybe they clean everything down and they do more testing and some, and maybe a month, maybe it's 1 month on, 1 month off. All the details are can vary from school to school, but it's basically it's a combination of online virtual and in-person residential. And so that's kind of what you've got there with that hybrid option. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, the other thing they mentioned that they did not explain what it was a block plan. Is that similar to the hybrid semester?
So with block, you have one, a lot of high schools have block. A lot of our listeners would be on block schedules. You take a short number of classes in block, and that's the only class that you have at that time. And when you're done the class, you're done it for the entire semester.
Right.
And so it's a concentrated, intense, deep dive into content. And then when you're done that content, you don't ever have it again. It's highly debated in educational circles. Some people feel it works really well in certain disciplines, but not as well in other disciplines. I know when I was, at the Westtown School from 01 to 09, they were not an advocate of the block plan because they found that students lacked the continuity in foreign language. And in math, having long lapses where you don't have the material at all was disadvantageous for you for your future growth. And, the next time when you picked it up, you hadn't had it for a while. Others think that intense type of focus on only one subject is advantageous. And you have schools out there that are known as block plan schools like Colorado College and Cornell, not Cornell University that we said went test optional. But Cornell College in Iowa, they're famous for their one course at a time plan.
Right. Okay. And then the last big category is what I think is going to be most likely. And that is that most schools are going to come back with a normal semester with adjustments. And it talked about 5 major adjustments that most schools are considering. The first adjustment is housing contingencies, where they try to enforce social distancing by spreading out the students. Now, many people will say, how are they going to do that? Because the dorms are not known to be socially distant places. They're often quite crammed. Well, places like Stockton are employing extra housing using, believe it or not, hotels and casinos, local casinos, to accommodate extra housing. And then places like William Jewell College are actually guaranteeing that all the students are going to receive individual apartments upon request. I don't know how they're going to finance that. They also talked about fall sports will have no spectators or could be canceled, that they're going to try separating by age groups, that they might have some type of testing of students before and while they're on campus. And the last, that they're going to have a toggle semester where they're ready to flip the switch at a moment's notice to online. So, Mark, let me just throw those out there and see if we can break them down and discuss the items that I just threw out there.
Well, first of all, I want to concur with you, Dave, that I do believe that this will, if you were to look at a pie graph market share, break it down, I think this will be the most common option of the different ones that we've discussed. Because I just think the financial pressures are such that most schools are going to open.
Yep.
Of course, there's another one we talked about before, which is a slight delay. And that also came up here as well. Like slight delay in your timeline. Maybe you start 2 weeks later,
That's right.
3 weeks later, and then you tack a week on the spring break and, take a week on your summer and maybe shorten your summer break. That's also an option as well. But one thing I'll say is that I expect schools to get extremely creative. Here's a case in point. How many, Dave, you know this, you've talked about on our podcast. Look at the vacancy in these hotels.
Yes.
Okay. Colleges have used hotels in the past when they've over-enrolled.
Right.
And they've over-enrolled and they've struck up a contract with hotels for housing. I can conceive of a scenario where a parent is interested in their kid having a residential experience, but they don't want somebody actually living in the dorm.
Yeah.
But the idea of having their own private place, that especially if it's super close to campus, that could be the difference between someone saying, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do this. And so I can imagine you could really negotiate some great rates for hotels that are basically sitting there vacant right now. So that's an example of where I expect schools to use a lot of creativity. And I think, there are a number of think tank groups that are these, and this came up even on with my meeting with Nebraska. There are a number of think tank groups addressing this issue, meeting, studying, working on proposals. I imagine people are going to come up with some incredibly unique and creative proposals that will emerge in the next 4 months.
And to that point, Mark, I know at Yale, what they did is once they cleared out all the undergraduates from their dorms, they then spread all the remaining graduate students out into the undergraduate dorms so that there would be social distancing and you would only have one person in one room, or they'd take a quad and only make it 2 people and so forth. So it is certainly foreseeable that you could see the undergrads coming back with that separation still in place. And as you said, them utilizing the extra vacancy of apartments or hotels in the area to expand the undergraduate campus. But my question to you, Mark, is that's going to cost a lot of money. Where's that going to come from?
Yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money, but University of Arizona's on my mind because I'm about to do a spotlight on them. They're already estimating that COVID's already costing them $250 million as is. So The alternative is even more costly.
Right.
No?
Right. And
who knows? I don't know if they'll be able to get away with extra fees for that or not, but it'll depend a little bit on the school. I want to read something that University of Pennsylvania is sending out just so you can see all of the different variations of schools, their policies. So this went out to a number of, especially international students, It says, Dear blank, I hope you are well in true Quaker fashion, that you are making the best of what has been a challenging year. Among many sources of uncertainty is the U.S. State Department's decision to temporarily suspend visas, and it has limited the availability of visa appointments throughout the world. I know that this is disappointing news for our international communities, and may also mean that some students will not be able to make it to campus in the fall. I'm writing to remind you of the option to take a gap year, and opportunity goes on and on and on. I don't want to go into too much more detail, but I just want to point out that there's so many different permutations to this because things are changing. And just this week, we had the announcement banning immigration, how that's going to impact colleges. Another thing I think that you will see is I think the schools that will be most likely to start the semester late and go online are going to be the most selective privates. Right. I think the group that will be most likely will be the most selective privates. And the reason for that, one is they don't want the liability, but also they have wait lists. And so when you're talking about places like where you're at, Dave, Yale, your daughter's at Stanford, schools like this, a number of them have come out and said, by the way, that they will be making announcements in July. Two of those different schools said you can expect an announcement. One said early July, one said July 8th, just to give people some certainty of when they'll be making an announcement about what they're doing in the fall. But the thing about those schools is, let's say they end up having to accommodate, let's say I'm just going to make this number up. Let's say it's a 12% gap year, which would be about triple to what they normally see, triple to 4 times what they normally see, or maybe even higher. They have the ability to go to their wait lists and literally find people that would be willing to come and pay that sticker price because of the prestige of the school.
Right.
So they can do this in a way where it won't impact their funding as much as other schools. Right. So in the article, it talks about how Stanford is seriously considering going online in the fall.
Right.
And I think there's a big difference between a Stanford and many other privates, not only because of their endowment, but because they have enough people on a wait list that they could go to them. And some of those people will be happy enough. If that's how they got into Stanford. They'll be willing to put up with that for a semester or 2 semesters. So the schools that I'm expecting to be most likely to be the ones to not be residential for the whole semester will be your most prestigious privates. That's the last thing I have to say. I don't know if you have any final comments, Dave, or you want to?
No, I want to concur because that is the general sense I'm getting, at least from hearing my daughter, who's got her ear to the ground of the communications that's going on between the students at Yale. 2 implications to that. Number one, I want to ask you, if you have more students taking a gap year, an increased amount of students coming off the wait list, aren't there some severe implications as to the acceptance rate a year from now when a school says we have to accommodate not just the students applying this year, but the anticipation that we're going to have an additional 5-10% of students that we accepted last year that deferred, making it even more competitive next year. So that's one issue to consider.
Yeah, and I'm having that conversation with my juniors right now.
Right.
I'm letting them know, like, there's a good chance it's going to be more competitive for you.
Right.
Because if a school's giving 10 to 15% of their spots away to gap years, then that means that they're taking 10 to 15% less people next year. Those spots are locked in. That's like an additional 10 to 15 ED slots locked in. It's just like when schools over-enroll. Yeah. Anytime I hear that a school over-enrolls, like when Virginia Tech over-enrolled 1,000 last year, or UVA went 4% over, I knew the next year was going to be brutal, which was this year, the 2020 class.
Right.
And so that's just, we're kind of getting away off topic, but it's a point worth noting.
Right. But I'll also note that this is not just going to affect the freshmen coming in, but it's going to affect the existing students for the most practical reasons. Mark, you and I have talked about the impact of COVID on physician salaries, lawyer salaries, everybody's salaries. My prediction is that the average physician in the United States is probably going to take a 25 to 30% cut in his or hit to his income this year just due to lost productivity. There are ER docs that are being having shortened shifts or being laid off entirely. There are specialists who've gone months without doing elective procedures. And so now, if the college all of a sudden says we're going online, what better time to take a gap year just to allow the family to financially recover? Because remember, many people who are paying full freight are actually paying on a monthly basis. You're paying that $8,000, $7,000, and to have that extra year to recover while your child has the option of doing something else.
Yeah, Dave, let's come back. I think we need to come back again and do another whole podcast on gap years. I really do. There's so much more to share about that.
Yeah.
Because, you're in the medical world, so you share that view.
Yeah.
You and I know your brother Michael's in private equity.
Yeah.
The big pay comes from bonuses there.
Yeah.
There's so many people. I see it with my clients. Who were very comfortable paying $80,000. Are now talking to me more and more about state schools, and talking to me about merit aid than ever before, which is one reason I'm glad we're doing the College Spotlight series, because I'm really trying to focus on great schools there that are in the $25,000 to $40,000 range for people. So, but let's transition there. This will be a 3-hour podcast.
You got. That's right.
Which is something I'm trying to avoid.
That's right. Hey, you were the one who brought up my debating skills. I was just trying to exercise.
I know. I knew this was going to be a long one because first of all, I had a tremendous amount of announcements already in the intro. I knew this was going to be long, but hopefully people enjoyed it. I always worry, try to be really candid with our audience. I always worry, like, it's a 2-hour podcast too long? Keep asking everybody, and hope you guys are being honest with me, because what you're telling us is, no, it's not. We can stop and start. And because you have 5 different topics, there's enough variety and 3 different voices, Dave, Anika, the interviewee. So if you have a different opinion, email that to us as well, because Dave and I are talkers, and you tell us to keep going, we're going to go.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, let's wrap up this article. I think we've covered. I'm going to do a quick review, Mark. Sure. The review of the article is, what is college going to look like with fall? There's 4 different scenarios. Number 1, it could be doing it online, such as San Jose State, Cal State Fullerton, at least for the first semester. Number 2, they may actually delay the fall semester at a later time. You talked about that. Stanford said they could be doing that. Number 3, there's the hybrid semester and the block semester plan, which you've talked about. That was a little technical in how that's detailed. And number 4 is what we think is going to be the most likely scenario. And that is that they are going to have a normal semester with adjustments, such as increasing housing to spread students out, possibly canceling fall sports or sports with no spectators, separating by age group, testing the students, and having a toggle semester mentality where they're ready to flip the switch at a drop of a hat and go online if the needs require. Mark, is there anything else in the article that you want to?
Yeah, there's one other thing I want to say, and that is, in the same way in which I'm being bombarded constantly, Mark, what do you think people are going to do? And one of my clients this week said, I thought paying $80,000 to go to Duke was my biggest problem, but now I have a bigger problem, paying it for online and my kids at home.
Right.
And so I'm being asked this nonstop, 24/7. And guess who else is being asked? Every admission office, every president.
Right.
And so what it's really making schools do, it's putting a lot of pressure on schools to issue some statements.
Yep.
So I'm seeing this week alone, I saw more and more and more clear communication from schools, either about what they're going to do or what they're at least thinking, going over their options, or when they'll be making an announcement. And another example is University of Miami. They came out. You can go to University of Miami's official YouTube channel and listen to the president, who does a 7-minute speech, basically in effect saying, we fully expect to be open in the fall. Now there's some language there and there. You can warm out of it a little bit. You know what I mean? It's not absolutely 100%. We're doing this, take it to the bank. But the point is, if you're in tune with the school's communication, okay, you're getting their emails, you're tuned into their social media channels, you are on their distribution list, then they are letting you know slowly in tidbits, oftentimes, either what they're going to decide or when they will be deciding it, or at least they're giving hints. So that's the last thing that I would tell you to do. And that's true for seniors, of course, because you literally at this point probably know where you're going, or you're really down to a couple schools. But it's also true for juniors who have a list of schools, and you kind of want to keep on tune in touch with what each school is going to do.
Right.
So that's my last thing that I would share.
Cool.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
So Anika, you know how you said like a couple weeks ago how you want to meet Dave?
Mm-hmm.
You got me all inspired because he said he's going to be in North Carolina for a week in June.
Oh, in June. That's a good sign.
Yeah. And so I thought maybe, I can drive down. I can spend a couple of nights in a timeshare or an Airbnb or something.
Awesome.
We can all get together, do a couple of dinners. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be awesome. Do it.
So I'm going to work on coordinating that. That'll be a blast. And Dave's all into. I already talked to him about it.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Looking forward to it. Now, COVID, don't mess with me in June. Oh my gosh. Darn it.
So I'm going to have you come back in the podcast afterward and say, so is Dave the same as you thought? Different than you thought?
Yay, Dave. See you soon.
So listen, Anika, before we transition to our chapter today, where we're going to, look at Pell Grant, I did think of something last week when I talked about how to increase your need-based aid that I didn't share. This is just something to think about. It. This is actually something that's actually really different between private K-12 schools, even the wealthiest boarding schools in the country, like the Phillips Exeters, versus colleges. And it's just something to think about, which is when if you're in a place where you can have one income and survive, maybe thrive, it's something you might want to think about, because what happens with K-12 admissions is they will assign a dollar amount for a non-working spouse and just add it to your EFC. And they'll say that's a lifestyle decision you made. Some schools do 20 to 30,000. Some do 12,000. But when I interviewed David Jelinas from Davidson, who's got 45 years experience, he said, I don't know of any college that does that. So sometimes if a family has enough money, like we've already said, that formula is totally income driven, it may be in your best interest to not have that extra spouse work. And I know that's still totally complicated. That opens up all kinds of cans of worms. Like maybe they want to work, or maybe you need the money to survive. But I'm just throwing it out there. Like you get more money when your income goes down. And that's one way. What are your thoughts on that?
Wait, you're not telling the spouse to quit their job.
No, I'm not saying it.
Let's be clear
if I
here,
said
Mark.
That, you would come through this phone, through this mic, strangle me, do like WWF wrestling, beat me down.
Halfway there. Just want to get some clarity first before I get through the other part of the wire.
No, so here's what I'm saying. There is a point, and the income level is not that high, where 47% of your income goes to your EFC. So there's a time when somebody might look at what they're actually making and say, wow, like I'm really not making that much because it's all going to the college. And I could do so many other things with that it's just a conversation that in certain cases makes sense. Can you at least believe that? Or can you not think of any case when it would ever make sense?
I cannot right now.
Really? So let's say you got somebody and they're making $30,000 and they hate their job.
The husband or the wife, whichever one.
Yeah, okay. Whoever. They hate it. And they hate it, so it's impacting their quality of life, stress. They feel like they're neglecting so many other things that they could be doing. And in reality, if by the time if you look at what you're actually going to be able to take home after that, knowing that to 47% of that is just going right to the college, there would be some cases where people would say, that's it. It's just not worth it. Like the 30,000 is enough so that even though I hate it, it's worth it. But if you're telling me I'm really only getting 15, it's just not worth this. Does that make sense?
I suppose it does. I'm just far, far removed from being in that.
You can't put yourself in that mindset of not needing the money.
No, I cannot.
Is it about needing the money or is it about loving the job?
Definitely not loving the job.
Okay, so it's about needing the money.
Yes, absolutely.
But not everybody is just like, like some people have more cushion. And they don't have to have it, but they do it.
I suppose so. Okay.
Okay, that's not the Anika world right now. I said before, that place needs to pay you more cash.
Oh God, like 1 billion times more. But
they really
I
do.
digress.
I see how hard they work you over there. Come up with the coins, please. Okay, let's get off of here. You never know who's listening to this podcast.
Right. No shade, boss.
Okay. All right, let's talk about today's topic, which is the Pell Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Huge program. And we would be remiss to not answer the question. Episode 118, chapter 118 of my book, what is a Pell Grant and how do I get it?
Mm-hmm.
So, Anika, you've read the chapter. Want to give us a summary and any questions you have about anything?
Yeah, well, just like you said, it's huge, the largest federal grant given out by the U.S. Department of Education. Fun fact, it was named after a Democratic senator, Claiborne Pell of Rhode Island. That was a senator who introduced the Pell Grant. And I want to kind of pause here after this one, is that it's not just for low income families, but also for moderate income families. Can you clarify moderate income?
Yeah. So one of the things you'll hear people say is the Pell Grant is just for low income kids. But in reality, 39% of people qualify for Pell. So we're basically talking about 4 out of 10 people in the country. That's a lot.
Okay.
So that's why I don't think you can say 40% of America is low income. So it taps into low and moderate income as well. And I just think that's an important distinction to include that. Now, let me say this. If you're talking in a context of people who are wealthy, it will feel like it's low income, right? Because the average income in this country is like $63,000 for a family of 4. So that's the average income. And for a lot of people, that feels like low income right there.
So, but are you saying that average is considered moderate? Is that what the moderate income is?
Well, I mean, I'll let people use their own definition. I just think that anything that basically 40% of the people qualify for is not just low, it's low and moderate income.
Okay.
Now, if you want me to get more specific, I can.
No.
And so there's a cutoff that determines whether or not you qualify for Pell. And that cutoff is based on your EFC. And it does slightly change every year. And so in the most recent 2021, it is an EFC of 5,711. So if you have an EFC above 5,711, you won't get Pell. If you have an EFC below 5,711,
okay,
you will get Pell.
You're right. Okay, because in the chapter you gave the figure of 4,995. So clearly, to your point, it goes up and down and around.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes up and down. And it changes every year at, it's like a 3% addition usually. Though it depends. It has to get through Congress and all. That's a big fight,
right?
Every year for that. And so you say, well, how much money is that? I don't know what 5711 is. That means nothing to me,
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's going to be around in the low 50,000s for a family of 4 adjusted gross income. Okay. So like 52,000 for a family of 4. And you can get some Pell with an income around there. But here's why I also say it's moderate, not just low income. If you have 2 kids in college, remember, the Pell's not based on income. It's based on EFC. Because if you have 2 kids in college, then your income could be considerably higher. Or 3 kids in college. Your income could be, you conceivably could have an income of $90,000 or $100,000 and still get the Pell Grant if you had 3 kids in college at the same time. So that's why I say it's low and moderate income. And then there's also an exception that allows you to get the full Pell. And that's if you had a parent or a guardian and they were a member of the U.S. Armed Forces and they died as a result of their military service in either Iraq or Afghanistan or 9/11, or if it's a public safety officer and they died as a result of their active service in the line of duty, then you can get the full Pell irrespective of your income. You could have a couple $100,000 income if you were in that situation. And so that's just why I just think it's a little bit not precise to just say it's only for low income kids.
Okay. And when you say full Pell, let's just jump to that real quick. So is that is $6,000 a year that you get if you qualify for the full amount?
So that's a great question. So the Pell has a range, and the range is between $650 and $6,345. Now that $6,345 that just got announced pretty recently because there was an adjustment. This stuff has to go through Congress and has to be voted on because we're talking about a lot of people. Right. We're talking about this is like billions and billions of dollars on the U.S. budget. So the range is anywhere between $650 and $6,345, depending on your EFC.
Okay.
If you have an EFC of 25,000 or under, that's called an automatic zero, and you'll automatically have a zero EFC, and then you'll get the full Pell, 6345. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. So what other Pell questions do you have, Anika?
I don't have any more. I mean, it's pretty clear, but I love this one point that you made in here and how you can become ineligible for Pell Grant. And that is through most incarcerations and convictions of sex and drug crimes. So that's kind of a bit of a issue, I think, in some cases.
No, it actually really is a bit of an issue. And let me go into this a little bit more, because this is actually pretty controversial.
Mm-hmm.
So let me take us all the way back. So the Pell actually was started in 1965. But originally, it wasn't called the Pell. The name got changed to Pell because in 1972, when some changes were made to the Higher Education Act, Pell, he played a big role in those changes. So because the senator you mentioned, from the Democratic senator from Rhode Island,
Claiborne.
So kind of as a tribute to him and the role that he played, that's when they first called it the Pell. Because before that, Anika, it was called the Opportunity Grant Program. And then they changed the name to 1972 into, because of the work that Claiborne Pell did. But there's also some controversy there because there was actually a woman named Lois Rice, and she did as much work as Claiborne Pell. And so a lot of people think it was really sexism that it got called the Pell Grant, not the Rice Grant. There's a little bit of interesting history.
Wow, okay.
And a lot of people consider her to this day to be the mother of the Pell Grant because of all she did. But it was such a male-dominated world that they gave the man the credit. So that was the first controversy. Now, the point you're bringing up. So when the American Opportunity Grant was first launched, and then the Pell Grant, the new name, prisoners could get the full Pell. There was no restriction. But Anika, do you remember the 1990s and the 3 strikes and you're out and tough on crime and
of course,
prison industrial complex and all that? Yep. Do you remember that time?
I do.
This was part of that time where everybody, Democrats and Republicans, were trying to out-tough each other and show how tough they were on crime. So it was actually in 1994 when Congress passed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act that they changed, they actually revoked a provision in the Pell Grant that said anyone who was incarcerated or in a state penal institution could not receive Pell. And so that was not how it was originally founded. And now the Obama administration, they tried to change this, and they tried to push an initiative that would have allowed, the banning for some prisoners. And it was called the Second Chance Pell Pilot, but it never really got through. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why I so strongly and so vehemently think this is wrong is because there has been a lot of activism over the years around providing education for prisoners. And there's a lot of real serious research that shows that when you provide education for prisoners, that you can significantly reduce the recidivism rates.
All right.
Like there was one study in 1997 with 3,200 prisoners in 3 states. And it showed that when they got education in prison, it reduced their likelihood of reincarnation by 29%. And then probably the biggest study, it's known as the BPI, or the Barred Prison Initiative. And this has been going on for a few decades now. And there have been over 600 BPI alumni who have been released in the last 20 years that have gotten, this is like, what happens with the Barred Prison Initiative is there's a lot of private money that's given to educate prisoners while they're in school because they can't, in prison, because they can't get Pell. And only 4% of people have gone back to prison. So what are your thoughts on barring people with certain offenses from being able to get the Pell Grant when they get out?
Oh, I mean, it's craziness. And I mean, we don't even want to go down the lane of false convictions and all that stuff. So it's tragic.
Well, this is a little bit on my mind. Have you ever seen the movie 13th, about the 13th Amendment?
I haven't.
It's a documentary.
No.
So what happened is Joy asked me last night if I would watch it with her because she actually loves that movie, but she also had to watch it for one of her classes at UGA. It's one of those movies you have to kind of be in the right state of mind to watch because it goes into the prison industrial complex and how like racial disparities in the criminal justice system and all of that. But after watching something like that, I just watched it last night. Like literally we stopped watching it at almost midnight. Then you read something like this, it's kind of really hard when you see, like you said, all the false imprisonment. Let's not even go there because I'll get mad. Get mad on the podcast.
We're gonna turn it to a medical / criminal justice podcast in a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think people will like Mad Mark. It's all good. But there are a few other things about Pell, just to cover a couple kind of quick facts that I think people might be interested in knowing about. So I'll just share a couple things. Pell is really for undergraduate. It's not for grad school.
Okay.
There are a couple exceptions. There's this post-baccalaureate teaching certification. So if you're going through this post-baccalaureate teaching certification, then you can get Pell. But that's pretty much about it. It's really an undergraduate award. It also will not work at a foreign school. Like you can get federal direct student loan money and go to a foreign school. You can't get Pell Grant money. So it has to be a U.S. school. You have to be either a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. And there are a few exceptions, but not very many in order to receive it. You have a maximum of 6 semesters to use it. So you can't like spread this thing out and do like, go on the 10-year plan and keep thinking you're going to get it. You got a maximum of 6 semesters to use it. It can be full-time or part-time. It can be for-profit schools or not-for-profit schools. It's not only for not-profit. You can, in fact, the most common school in the country that gets Pell is the University of Phoenix. On the huge online school.
Okay.
That's a for-profit school. And the last thing that I wanted to share on Pell is that Pell in 1975 and 76, it covered 75% of the cost of attendance of an average public school. And now it covers less than 30%. So it used to be, Pell was really designed to cover almost all the costs of you going to your public and state schools. And it has not kept up at all with the cost of increases in tuition, room and board and everything. And that's one of the reasons why, people have so much debt. So that's an overview of Pell. Anything you want to comment on that I shared?
Let's get this Pell back to growing. Let's get it back. Shucks.
I mean, there's a lot of real initiatives. There's even an initiative going on right now called Double Pell. But the problem is the political will is not there for that. Right. Like some people don't see it as valuable and they'd rather just use taxpayer money in different ways. And I'll tell you what, we're going to have a real problem right now, Anika, because all the money that we're spending, like at some point, like we're doing the equivalent. And I understand like, hey, COVID and all this stuff, like, you know what I mean? You got to keep people from being homeless and keep every business from going under. I'm not being critical of that, but it's the equivalent of charging up a huge bill on your credit card and giving it to your kids. It's going to be very hard to have the political will to put through something that involves drastically increasing Pell spending when we're running such big debts and deficits. And even when we didn't have those big debts and deficits, there still were a lot of conservatives that were very much against supporting low and moderate income kids. Although there are some conservatives that are champions of this. So it's not just, doesn't always break down completely on party lines.
That's good to know.
Are you Pelled out?
I think I am. No, I'm not really, but
It really bothered me that Louise Rice, that she didn't get the credit she deserved. Because a lot of people think she did. You know what I mean? But
I'm going to have to look her up.
Then.
I am going to look her up. That's interesting.
Yeah, look her up. She's called, her nickname is the mother of the Pell Grant.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right. So this week's question is from Eric in Colorado. And Eric wants to know, how much should I as a parent be involved in selecting the colleges that my child applies to?
Didn't you think that was a good question?
It was a good question. I had to actually reflect on it a little bit. I was like, what did I do? But yeah.
So now that you reflected on it, I'll put you on the spot. How would you answer this if Eric asked you that?
Well, Jalen was pretty, of course, I thought about him first. And I did not have really, well, first of all, we weren't into big lists. Like, this family's just not a big list family. We will never be that. And he was introduced to Davison by his high school. And it was a nice transition, at least what we thought from, where he was. It was a comfort level. It was a good fit. And so we didn't think much beyond that because we just kind of, I don't know.
Well, remember, he did that 3-week summer program.
And he did. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. And so with that, what I'm saying is that I wasn't going around, he didn't present me with this big list of, okay, I'm thinking about all these things and da-da. So we just didn't go through that exercise.
Now, I remember you kind of liking Washington University in St. Louis.
Oh,
I remember
loved Washington State. But
I was involved in this process with Jalen.
Yeah, that's an exception there. But we both quickly agreed that it was just too far away. Like, the location just wasn't ideal. Because you remember you took us, we were going through that exercise of, okay, location, how important was that? Yep. And it was important. No family around or anything like that. So that kind of took them off the list pretty quickly. But yeah. So, and then with Janaea, again, it's just like, for us, man, we're just not that list family, man.
Well, so there's the list aspect, and there's also what you want to do with somebody's life too. Because I remember for a while you were trying to maybe steer Janae into something other than animal science. Remember that?
Well, yeah, but that's her interest, not her school selection. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you should go to this part of the country, or you should go to this quality school, or this perceived type of school. That kind of thing. So, yeah.
So then, how would you answer it? What would you tell Eric? How much should the parent be involved? What would you say?
I just say I think you should take it as an organic process. For me, what kind of everyone's situation is a little different in terms of their approach. So I think it just depends on a case by case basis. Honestly, Mark, you clearly work with a trillion families, so I would love to hear your answer. But I feel like I do feel like it's an organic process or organic kind of way to fall into it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is. There's definitely not a one size fits all. I mean, this is like snowflakes. It's customized. For one, even different cultures are different that I work with in terms of the role the parents play versus a student. I have a question on my 111 question questionnaire, and it asks. This is a question it asks the parent. It's just my questionnaire that I use for list building. I have 81 questions for students and 30 questions for parents. So one of my questions on the parent side is the decision of where to go to college exclusively the child's, primarily the child's, 50-50, primarily the parent, or exclusively the parent? I ask that because I want to know, like, the mindset the family has going in. I'm happy when they say primarily the student. That's what I like to see. But that's not where some people are 50-50. I mean, it just varies.
Right.
Here's some of the things that I think people need to ask themselves in terms of what involvement the parent should have. So We've talked before about this, Anika. Are we as parents, are we vicariously living through our kids in a sense that we're trying to have our do-over experience? Like, this is what I wish I could have done. And so we're trying to get that through our kids. That's not something that people are conscious of. It's very subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
That's a question that parents need to honestly reflect and answer. A lot of times I have to tell to a parent, I said, you know what? Your child got to have your college experience. This is their opportunity now. However, there are extremes, and there's the other side of it, which is this. You know your child really well. Let's say you know that your child is just not like a big city kind of kid. And all of a sudden your child's talking about going to New York or LA or Chicago or something like that. And it's a school that's smack dab in the middle of the city. Nothing is wrong. In fact, I would even go so far as to say you would be remiss to not challenge them and say, now think about it, George. Just made a name up, George. You've really never, when we've gone to cities, that hasn't really resonated with you. Are you sure you can see yourself here for 4 years? Like, if you see your child about to make a mistake based on your knowledge of them, I feel as a parent, you're remiss to not bring it up. But I also think you have to do it in a way where you know your child.
Right.
Because there's a kind of child that there's something definitely true about that strong-willed child. And there's a type of child that will rebel against anything the parent says. And there's another kind of child like Dave. Dave will say stuff to Lauren. Lauren, I want you getting up at 8 o'clock and reading this physics book. And then I want you to write a 3-page report for me. And I want it. And I want, Dave knows this. I call him a tiger dad. He's a tiger dad. And I want it in 24 hours on my desk. And she'll be, sure, Dad. I'm like, if I did something like that with especially Joy, it would be World War III.
Janaea. Oh my God.
The stuff Dave can tell Lauren to do, and she's just like this perfect child that does it. It's like, I'm like, you realize that if you had another child, it wouldn't be like this, right? I tell him that all the time. He says, yeah, that's what everybody tells me. It's all his only experience. He can be the drill sergeant over there and get away with it.
Right.
Never do that.
Good grief.
So that's a piece of it, is knowing your child.
Mm-hmm.
That's a component. Check your motives.
And when you say knowing your child, Mark, is there I'm sure there's some level of assessment on your child's maturity level. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a matter of what their exposure has been and what the things they think about, things they don't think about. So I would imagine that would play a huge role.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up. Let's say you feel as if this just too live of a party scene going on here. And I know my child, I see them getting sucked up in there and forgetting why they're going to college. Mm-hmm. Then I feel as a parent, you're being remiss to not address that in some capacity. Now, if it's to an extreme, then I think you can sometimes take drastic measures. Like if you're so convinced that my kid is about to run off the ledge and go over the cliff, then you are involved in the funding.
Right.
And you can say, I'm just not going to support that because I don't believe that a parent should just financially support no matter what their child does if they're absolutely convinced that their child is about to make a really, really bad decision. I personally think a parent has a right to say, to stand their ground there. But what I don't think you should do if it's just an opinion thing, kind of be my preference if you'd into this, or I'm not sure if you'd like this. It has to be something where you really strongly feel they're about to run over the cliff. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. The other area where parents need to really be involved in this process, and this is one of the biggest areas that they're not involved. It's one of the most common mistakes I experience in both my private practice as well as working with, kids in the charter school district I work. And that is setting boundaries when it comes to price and having conversations early about price.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of things that should be discussed, and people don't discuss it. Now, my question here makes people talk through all this. And I know, because I do this with everybody, that most families have not done this.
All right.
So they have to answer questions with me like, are you expecting your child to take student loans? If so, how much? Are you expecting your child to work? How much are you expecting them to contribute from their work? How much are you willing to pay? What's the maximum amount you can pay? And I'm a believer that you go through this whole extensive process, you create a budget, and then you say, just like if you're buying a house or a car or anything, we're going to look for colleges that fit within this budget. And you tell your child up front early on, this is how much I can contribute. This is what I expect you to be able to contribute. And we're going to find the best possible college we can within our price point. And that's a major mistake because most people don't do that.
Right.
And that's what leads to lots of problems. Because a kid thinks that they can go wherever they want, and the parent gets the bill and like, I'm not paying for that. And had they established that early on, in most cases, it would have been okay.
Yikes.
So that's a place where a parent absolutely needs to be involved, because they're paying, and your budget, your other obligations, what we call opportunity costs, what you could do with certain money and other things for enrichment. You got other kids you're thinking about. It's not, by the way, it's not selfish for a parent to say, my retirement is not where it should be. And if I don't start making contributions to my retirement, I'm going to be, I used to say I'm going to be that 75-year-old working at Walmart, but now I got this idea from somebody else. I say, I'm going to be asking my kid if I can live in their basement. And so there's nothing wrong with saying that. Like I'm way behind where I should be in my retirement, and I'm going to have to contribute, because I'm not going to be 75-year-old working at Walmart. I say working at Walmart, but you get the point. That's just an example. So all those things are things that have to be factored in. And so the bottom line is there's a role for a student and a role for a parent. And in this process, what's ideal is for the student and the parent to agree on a list of schools that they all agree on a price point, and then let the kid pick from any within that group. That's how I like to do it. So what do you think about what I said, Anika?
I think Eric should take that to every salt and grain that is worth, especially the financial part. Like I just think of the way too many kids that I know that just stopped after the first year, even first semester, because they couldn't afford to go back.
There's another area too that parents, they love their child so badly and they want what's best, but they have to be very, very careful. And that is, it's so important to kids that they please their parents and that they feel like they're making their parents proud. And something that I experience a lot, especially with kids in upperly mobile, affluent suburbs and in private schools. But not only there, it happens even with poor kids as well. Because the interesting thing, and I think I've said this before, Anika, on the podcast, I work with like almost an equal number of people over my 21 years of doing this. I feel like if you said to me, take three groups of people that make under 50,000, people that make 50 to 500, and people that make over 500. I don't know which of those groups I've worked more with. To me, it's been like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. I've had the fortune of being able to work with a lot of very wealthy families, a lot of very poor families, and a lot of in the middle families.
Okay.
And so I feel like I've seen this from all different perspectives. And what I'm about to say really does transcend income. And a lot of times parents in very subtle ways make their child feel like they can do better when it comes to college, and kids pick it up. So for example, I'll go over a list of all the options that their child is eligible for. And I'm presenting this to the student and parent at the same time. And then the parent says something like, what about if they went to like one of these schools for a year? Could they transfer after that and like go to like Texas or Michigan? And like the kid, like I'll sometimes even see their face change or their eyes change. And it's like, parents don't even realize that the parent thinks I just want my child to have the best opportunities. Sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes there's some, I want to maintain my social status in my social circles. And parents look at where a kid got in college as a verdict on their parenting.
Wow.
Sometimes it's that. But sometimes it's, they just want the best for their kid and they think, well, this school over here will lead to more opportunities. So it's complicated because it could be a mixture of both. But the way the child interprets that is, I don't think my parents are proud of me. And that's what leads to a lot of mental health issues. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think we all need to hear that again. Yeah, that's serious. And it's sad.
I don't think that I never felt like you or Javon did that at all. Having worked with you through this process twice, I don't think, and there's not one time I ever thought, I think Anika and Javon are they got to be careful.
Right.
But I'm sure you've seen and observed this
I was literally trying to think back on people that I know that may have done something like that. I don't know. I haven't thought of that yet, but that's just
it's actually very common, especially in affluent suburbs and private school circles. And it's bad because a lot of times the kids are already under so much pressure in those environments just within the peer culture, because peers kind of figure out a pecking order of, oh, that's a really good school. That school's not that good. You know, it's so funny. I was listening to the student talk about this game that she felt constantly that she was going through. And, you know, in this environment, everybody was always asking, where are you going to college? Where are you going to college? Where are you going to college? And she felt they were like sizing her up, how good of a student she is based on her college list. And she got fed up with it. So she started like just mentioning the local community college around the corner every time somebody would do that. and just to see, and she said the looks on their face, they would just like be aghast, like, oh, I thought you could do better than that. But that was just her way of saying, I'm just shutting this whole thing down. You know?
Good for her. Gracious.
I thought that was brilliant.
All right, Eric. Well, let us know how it goes, my friend.
Okay, friends. We are in part 2 of what is still one of my favorite interviews I've done in a while with Vincent Garcia. And of course, Vincent is he's helping us to understand the 23 different schools in the CSU system, the California State University system. And we're in part 2. And this week I asked Vince if CSU schools can compete with UC schools when it comes to matriculating students. Vince and I talk about the graduation rates at CSU schools. Vince talks about what it means for a campus to have impacted majors and what you should do when the programs you are interested in are impacted. And we talk about the advantages of starting out at community college if you want to go to either a CSU or a UC school or one of the private schools in California. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
What about San Jose State?
San Jose State, increasingly, because of its location right in the middle of Silicon Valley, is really very, very popular, and especially if you're a local student. And there are benefits for students who live in certain areas where the CSUs may be more selective. So if you live in that area, Santa Clara or the Silicon Valley, your chances of getting in are going to be stronger or higher than they would be if you were applying from San Diego. But because of where they are, their majors in computer science, computer engineering, anything that would deal with technology would be very sought after. The challenge there is if you don't live in the area, the cost of housing is tremendous. So if you're trying to get to Silicon Valley in a more inexpensive education way, San Jose State would be a great option, but where you would live would be a challenge.
Do you find, Vince, that some of the CSU campuses can compete with some of the UC campuses, or do you feel the mindset in the CSU is just to back up to UC?
I think that San Luis Obispo can definitely hold its own with the University of California. In fact, they're probably more selective than some of the UC campuses. I also believe that in terms of retention and graduation rate, that San Luis Obispo also is really competitive with the University of California. But then once you get beyond San Luis Obispo, there's an initiative in the CSU system to improve graduation rates, but you're finding, because of the impact of there being so many students who want into the CSU system, that students planning on finishing in 4 years is really a challenge. And you see 4-year graduation rates at the harder to get into options like San Diego State of 29% after 4 years are graduating. And then it sort of rises by the 6th year to around 50%. So if you're a student who's looking at that as a cost savings, you have to factor in that it's very likely that you're going to spend a 5th and a 6th year to get out of there. And you're probably going to be, if you want to graduate earlier, you almost have to do work in the summer to stay on task. And I think that the CSU system is going to get better at making sure students can finish in, well, it's almost when they report the graduation rate, they're kind of assuming, and they're not telling you this, they're assuming that you're going to finish in 5 or 6 years. And they're leaving it up to the consumer, parents and students, to figure out, oh, nobody's really graduating in 4 years. And as a parent or a student who may have to finance their own education, it's really important that you be aware of those graduation rates.
I'm really glad you brought that up. And I wanted to ask you about that because it's something that I know I've encountered with students I work with that are looking at CSU schools and versus UCs and other schools as well, is the lower graduation rates. And I've wondered how much of that has to do with how difficult it is to get certain classes. And therefore, if you're not really planning, not really intentional, you can end up, extending that extra year or 2 years versus we know when you have more non-traditional students, you have more part-time students, you have more adult students, you have people balancing jobs or significant work hours. And so they're not necessarily taking full-time workloads and they're older and they have families. And, it's just inevitable that that type of student will be on a longer path. How much of a role do you think that plays in the graduation rates not being as high as UC and some of the other highly competitive schools in California?
I think that it's important to say that there are multiple reasons and that some of the reasons are based on there's 6 campuses where every major at these 6 CSUs are impacted. And impacted means that you're not really admitted until you meet the requirements for the major once you've been there for a period of time. And that it may set the bar higher for students who are out of the local context area. So if you're applying to Long Beach and you're outside of Long Beach, for instance, the students that they would take from the Long Beach area, which is sort of their local service area, and each campus defines what that local service area is. You could have like a 3.5 if you wanted to be admitted to CSU Long Beach. But if you were applying from Sonoma County and wanted to get into business administration, they would automatically say that the students that they want to take from Sonoma might be, a 3.8. So all of the programs at San Luis Obispo, Fresno State, Fullerton, Long Beach, San Diego State, and San Jose State currently are impacted, every single major. So you, as a student, you probably have to be more self-motivated and be good at sort of navigating large public school settings if you want to make sure that you stay on track. But I do think that those other factors, a lot of students who attend the CSU system are paying for the opportunity to stay enrolled and be enrolled in the CSU. So they are working probably generally more hours. They're usually commuting. And there are times where I think the ease of getting classes because of they're impacted can be a real challenge. And so you'll find students taking 1 or 2 classes. They wanted to take 4 or 5, but they just weren't even available.
So what's your advice to a student who's looking at a school they're really interested in and they find out it's an impacted campus or impacted programs? Do you generally encourage them to still apply to that school and to, work within the confines of that? Or do you think, why don't we look at some other colleges that are impacted in your area of interest?
It's interesting. I think, again, it's sort of a both and is the best answer. It sort of depends on what the goals are. So if the price is what's really attractive to you, which campuses have higher graduation rates, which campuses are you automatically admissible to based on GPA and test scores, I would encourage students. But I would also say that there's so many great campuses in California and the surrounding areas, if you're looking for a particular major, I think it's important to look at some non-state schools to make sure that you have a place where if you want to finish in 4 years or 4.5 years or 5 years, it's pretty much understood that you will. But even that, I think that one of the things that I always encourage my parents and students to look at, even at the independent schools, sometimes you're surprised when you see the 4-year graduation rate at places that are smaller or medium sized where you'd expect it to be much higher. But it's increasingly surprises me how many people don't even look at that information.
Yeah, especially when, you're really talking about adding substantial dollars to your cost. And if you look at it in really the bigger context, you're adding a 5th and 6th year. You almost have to look at it from a business perspective, like what could you be doing with your time,
right.
and that to get ahead in your career, even in addition to the costs.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's really important to look at the graduation rates and look at the kind of student that you are. There have been times where I've said to students, the cost of your education is really paramount in this decision. And a lot of what you do in the first 2 years of wherever you are is general education. And sometimes the local community colleges here in California, you can do a lot of that education and spend much less than you would if you were at a 4-year public or private institution. But there are some challenges there. You have to know where you want to end up and what you're doing, because the community college system in California is really robust. And most of your if you want to transfer to a private school or the UC system in California, the biggest number of students that they're looking at are the ones that are coming from community college after high school seniors. So their priority is one thing that also I think it's important to mention for students who are at a CSU. Once you're at a 4-year university, the University of California and the private schools are probably a little bit less interested in you because you're already at a 4-year institution. They're really interested in getting students from local community colleges. So it's better if you're coming from a community college system to transfer to, let's say, USC or UCLA from community college than if you're at Cal State Northridge.
Yeah, let's talk about this, because I know you and I have talked about this offline in other conversations before. And I respect that about California. And I find Florida set up similar, where there's a very robust community college system that's highly respected by the colleges, and not only just the public schools, like, places like the USCs and the Pomonas, I find are much more receptive and eager and excited about getting a great community college kid than I find in other private schools, for example, in the East Coast.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, we've never done this before, but you're getting 3 recommended resources this week. That's right, 3 big ones. I promised in episode 116 to give you this invaluable link to the IPEDS data to research the financial health of every college and university. So that's our first one. Secondly, virtual.go-to-college fairs is having a virtual conference and college fair from May 4th to May 6th. So if I don't include it this week, it'll be too late. The list of topics discussed will be of interest to all of our listeners. Here is one topic that I would love for our seniors and parents of seniors to check out. It is entitled, What to Expect the First Year of College. And there's over 20 speakers at this event. There are also hundreds of colleges who will have admissions officers present, and some of them are even setting up video interviews. Finally, we will share a link that is updated daily with every new school that goes test optional, with details of whether it is for 1 year, 2 years, or permanently. For all three of these recommended resources, you will find the links in our show notes.
So when you're counseling when you're working with a family, tell me when you find you're encouraging someone to go for the community college option and then to transfer in versus go right into the 4-year option, whether that's a Cal State, a UC, or even a private California college.
It's interesting because I would say that if they're not thriving at a CSU or an out-of-state 4-year school and they want to end up at the University of California or USC or Oxy or Pomona, it's better to be at a community college in California. They have such tremendous access, both in registration and online opportunities. And because the community college system in California allows you to sort of cross enroll. So if you can't get that, calculus class at LA Pierce College, you can get it at LA Valley College, which is not really that far away. So there have been times when I've had students who were at a CSU and they just were not thriving, but they wanted to transfer, that they left the CSU. Or I had a student who was, I think, at Weber State in Utah, came to California Community College and ended up transferring, had opportunities at Berkeley and UCLA, Michigan, USC, and all of those campuses were really interested in a strong community college student. But if they had already been or if they have tried to transfer from Weber State or CSU Northridge, they would have been less interested.
Let's delve into that a little more. It's because it's fascinating. I think our listeners will find that fascinating. How much of that has to do with them just wanting to support the local community colleges, system, almost in a sort of a partnership sort of type arrangement, versus how much of it has to do with just their respect for the curriculum and their familiarity with the curriculum? Obviously there's, well-established articulation agreements that worked really smoothly, and I'm sure that's a huge part of it. But what are the reasons why you find the schools, hold the community colleges in California in such high regard?
Well, part of it is that it was built into the master plan. So when the state of California came up with the master plan for higher education in California, there were 4 tiers. There was community college, there was the CSU system, which took a little bit longer than the University of California to get up and rolling. But then the 4th tier was that there were independent school options. So they built the system to feed into one another. So if you were at a community college, you could go to any of the other 3, CSU, UC, or independent schools, because they were set up to create access. And really the issue with the master plan, even though it was created in the 60s and access wasn't a big word at the time or word that was in vogue, they were really trying to expand because so many soldiers coming back from the various different wars. That's when you saw the biggest increases in higher education in U.S. history. So the plan since 1960 has been to increase access, and that's why they hold community college enrollment and the opportunity to study either at a CSU or UC in such high regard.
Do you find in working with California students, Vince, that there's any stigma to community colleges, that it's seen as less than for people coming right up? Because that's very true in other parts of the country. It's difficult for me to make the case to a kid from a middle class family to consider going the community college route. If you do well there, you'll have plenty of really good 4-year options. At the end of the day, everybody sees where you graduated from and you can save a lot of money. That's a really, really tough sell. What do you find it's a different experience in California, or does it sort of fall along sort of social class lines?
Social class line, it definitely follows along social class lines. But I also find that people where high school did not work out, for whatever reason, for lots of different reasons. I've had students who got their CHASP or their graduation exam, the state graduation exam, and they have a certificate that says that they're ready to move on. That those who are may and be have more opportunities and more financial support from families, they're at that point more willing to support the community college system, and often it's really, I find that once students graduate from high school, they're not really paying attention to where somebody ends up. But if they start suddenly posting that, I went to the USC game and I went to this and this, they realize at some point this person ended up there. But ultimately you can sort of move beyond it if the student and the family realizes that nobody's tracking them after they graduate. That's what I try to tell them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I can make the case for someone who has struggles in high school, and may not like their options. And I can make the case if it's just completely not financially viable. But other than that, it's tough, and I respect. The times that I can do it is actually in California and in Florida. Those two state systems, there's at least much more openness. I think they've known of examples where people have started community college and they see the options that they've had. But it can be a tough sell, and for me in other parts of the country.
The only school where it's not a tough sell, and it's partially because they're so strong and their reputation for job placement is probably the strongest in the state. For architecture, San Luis Obispo, but also for engineering and business. At San Luis Obispo, you can make the case for a parent or a student in California that is a superior opportunity because their job placement is so high.
That's great.
Next week in the news, we will be selecting an article closer to the time of recording so we can be timely and appropriate. Our book chapter will be What is FSEOG and who receives this grant? Our question from a listener will be, I'm a junior from Wellesley, Massachusetts, and I would like to know, when should I start writing my personal statement? Our interview will be part 3 of Vincent Garcia's series, Understanding the 23 Schools in the California State University System. And our college spotlight will be the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, the flagship school for the state of Massachusetts.
Hey, friends, we've got back-to-back flagships because this week we're looking at the University of Arizona, which is the flagship school for Arizona. And they go by 3 nicknames. You'll hear some people call them UA, some will call them U of A, or just the Wildcats. They are one of 2 Common App schools in Arizona. The other is their rival school, Arizona State, which is located 2 hours away, just outside of Phoenix. Both Arizona and ASU are in the Pac-10 Athletic Conference, and they both were founded in the same year, 1885. Arizona is located in Tucson, which is the second largest city in Arizona, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, with a metropolitan population right at around 1 million right now. One of the things Tucson is known for is 350 of the 365 days a year, they have sunshine. You like sun and fun. Yes, Tucson may be the place. Mount Levin is also a famous destination 45 minutes away. You can go 45 minutes away and get snow. They're also known for their 23 miles of outstanding Mexican restaurants. It is a city that is known for its stargazing. And one of the nice things about it is you don't have to have a car because they have a streetcar system that will take you from campus, University of Arizona, all over the city without a car. This is something I didn't know until I did research for this college spotlight. Tucson is the first place in the United States to be designated as a city of gastronomy by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, known by its acronym UNESCO. And basically, this is saying it's like the opposite of a food desert. It's saying as a metropolitan area, not only is it a cultural center when it comes to the arts, but it just has an outstanding array of quality restaurants. Like 17 cities have got this designation, and they're the first one in the United States to get it. Nice little fun fact there. On campus, you're going to find cactus trees, palm trees, a variety of types of trees, plenty of green spaces, all against the backdrop of the desert and the mountains. Some of the famous places on campus would be the Student Union Memorial. This is the place where there are plenty of on-campus restaurants, movie theater, bookstore, great place to meet students and hang out. There's what's known as the UA Mall. And this is where all the action is when it comes to school spirit, sunbathing, tailgating, frisbee throwing, outdoor studying, large green space area full of Arizona sunshine. The most historic landmark would be Old Main Building, founded in 1891, which is where the admission office is. And UA has a lot of very strong programs. And so I'm just going to run through some of them, but they have quite an array. Exceptionally strong fine arts program in the whole fine arts district, really. When it comes to architecture, they are a leader. They're a leader in sustainable design and planning for arid areas. It's kind of a niche they've carved out as a specialty, talking about things like sustainable energy, alternative energy, water conservation, climate change, adaptation, heritage conservation. They're also known for their College of Architectural and Landscape Architecture, and known as CALA, regarded by many as a top 10 program, top 15 program in the country. College of Management is very strong, entrepreneurship strong, aerospace and mechanical engineering is strong, robotics, nanotechnology, biomed engineering, all strong. They started something really cool called their Bio 5 program back in 2001, and it allows cross-collaboration in 5 different disciplines. So those disciplines are medicine, science, pharmacy, agriculture, and engineering. They have a huge focus on research at UA. Some of the world's top researchers work here. And one of their concentrations, which is very popular right now, is the spread of infectious diseases. Let's say a little bit more about their research a little bit later, because it's definitely a strength. U of A is home to the only public medical school health science center in all of Arizona. So this includes nursing, public health, and pharmacy. And having a hospital right on campus allows all of these students to get real-world experiences while they're getting their education. Another strong program goes by the acronym SALT, and that's an acronym for their Strategic, Alternative, and Learning Techniques program, which is where students with learning differences learn customized techniques, get great supports to get a great education that is accommodated to their needs. Another strength is their optical science program. Astronomy in general is absolutely something they're known for. Really, the whole Arizona area, that whole Tucson area is known for that. Overall, science is definitely where U of A hangs its hat. It is known as the greatest academic strength within the school. English and history get good reviews as well. But UA is, people think science when they think UA. Another very interesting thing is that they were the first university in the country to offer a BA in law, bachelor's in law, which is really cool. And what they actually do is you take your typical 4-year curriculum, but if you apply to the University of Arizona's law school and you get in, they actually count your last year of your BA in law as your first year in law school. So it's known as a 3+3 program. So you get out of law school in 6 years. And that's something actually that Harvard has looked at Arizona and adopted that as well. Now this 3+3 program to get you out in 6 years. Retail and consumer science is another really strong program at the school. And the Stevie Eller Dance Studio, I know with my dance students, I'll oftentimes refer them here. Very strong dance program. And this would be both modern, ballet, and jazz. Definitely one of the strongest programs in the country in regard to that. A few other exceptional programs. Overall, the business school, many think it's a top 20 business school. One of the strongest program would be their management information system. And they're definitely in the conversation for the best program in the country for the management information system. So, and lastly, I'll say, like their rival Arizona State, they are considered one of the top schools in the country for online education. So, Dave, I'm kind of at the halfway point. I've been talking a lot. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think so far?
Well, it brought me back. Now, here's a memory for you. You know, the first time I was in Arizona, remember
Norm's wedding?
Norm's wedding. And remember, they were in Arizona, I think the Phoenix area before they moved to the Denver area, just after Dallas. And it was in December.
So Dave, let's tell people, because Norm's my brother, my only brother. He lives in Denver.
Yeah.
I got married in August of 1990. He got married in December of 1990. Right. He's a year and a half younger than me.
Yeah.
And his wife is from the Tempe area.
Yeah.
Well, actually, she originally is from Glencoe, Dave.
Yes,
but,
that's right.
Yeah, your area. But she, ended up going to Arizona State University. And so they had their wedding in Tempe, Arizona. So talked about Norm. That's my brother. And he's going back 30 years. And Dave was at the wedding. And what'd you want to say, Dave?
Well, we were coming from Toronto and we thought, fantastic, we're going to Arizona. So the only thing we packed were like T-shirts and shorts. And when we didn't realize that you get snow in December at the Grand Canyon. So you had all these Caribbean Canadians freezing at the Grand Canyon.
I know. Not only that, but it only hit like 60 in the Tucson area at that time. I remember us going up to, I remember us taking a trip up to Flagstaff.
Right.
It was like 20 degrees up there.
That's right. And I said, it never got this cold on all the Clint Eastwood movies. What's wrong with y'all?
So friends, when you've known somebody all your life, like Dave and I literally have, those of you who don't listen, our dads have had like a 75-year-old friendship. We literally grew up together. You're going to get some going down memory lanes, and it's taking us. And plus, we're getting to be old heads.
That's right. That's right. Our daughters are rolling their eyes. Move on, Dad.
Exactly.
But how is this relevant? It's relevant that I still remember what a beautiful place Arizona was. And of course, that's 30 years on, and Arizona has become, I think, one of the top destinations of people moving to that state. So my memories may be a little old of the Tucson area, but I still remember how beautiful that is. And if you're into that desert climate, and 90% of the time, the climate is just beautiful. It's a solid school, and it's in the Pac-10, correct? Isn't it not in the Pac-10?
Correct.
Yeah. So
I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec.
Pac-10 sports, beautiful climate, and what I remember is you get Pac-10 beauty at Midwest prices. So
I'll touch on the money in a second.
Yeah.
Did I say anything about any one of the programs that either, caught your attention? I mean, I mentioned a lot of them.
Bachelor of Law. I've never heard of that. A bachelor in law.
Yes.
And so my question,
they're actually the first school in the country to offer that. A 3+3 program. And it's kind of a smart idea. Like if you know you want to be an attorney,
right?
Why not start to get some exposure there now, similar to the BSMD programs, right?
Right, and
shave a year off.
Well, it reminds me of last week's podcast when we talked about Chapman University having a 5-year PhD. Look, folks, let's face it, we're entering into hard times. And if you hear us referencing money, it's because in hard times, it's all about the money. And anytime you can shave a year off anything, that represents anywhere from a $30 to $40 to $50 to $80,000 discount that you could throw into a whole lot of things and make a whole lot of good investments. So anytime you can say, I want to be a lawyer and I can do it in 6 years instead of 7, that's a good investment. So
I concur with everything Dave said, but he's a good sport. And I told him I'm going to bust on his chops on one of these podcasts. He knows what I'm going to say.
Uh-oh.
He knows what I'm going to say. He's ready for it.
That's right.
So Dave, this is what I say about Dave. In addition to all of that wisdom, and he's also very astute and very good businessman, so I respect him highly. But he can push Lincoln off the penny, okay?
That's right.
He can push Lincoln off that penny. And I have to tell you guys one story. So my dad, who refers to his Uncle Alfred, we were taking a trip to Philadelphia with his brother Andrew, Michael, himself, Norm, my brother Norm, all of us. And we're really dating ourselves. So this is like 1979. So
that's right.
We're like in high school.
You're the Jackson 5.
Yes. Yeah. And so
afros.
Afros, exactly. All of that. Boom boxes on your shoulder. I remember getting a boom box in Philly.
That's right.
So So my dad says, listen, I'm giving every one of you $2 for lunch. Get what you want with your $2. And it's like $2. And so sounds so ridiculous, but that's probably like eight to 10 now.
That's right.
So what does Dave do? He pockets the $2 and then he hits all of us up for our extra food that we don't want to eat. Right. Yes, he did. He's hitting us up for our bread.
I like, Mark, throw me some fries, man. Throw me some fries. Give me a bite of that thing.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I end up the trip. I got $20 in my pocket.
Yeah, and he's continued to do that. What do you drive, Dave? A 1993 Lexus, or your wife drives that or something now?
Oh yeah, no, I'm cheap, man. I'm cheap. You know, I talk a lot about my Tesla, but right now I've only sprung for the stock for a reason. I stick with my 18-year-old Lincoln Navigator that I got for $10,000.
And I don't think in your life, have you ever spent more than $12,000 on a car?
I did one time. I just got out of residency, and I remember the Lincoln Navigator was like the first year, and I went out and I paid full sticker price for that car. And I rode that car until it got smashed up. That's another story. But I remember when I paid it off, and I realized that a car that at the time cost about $40,000, I paid over $60,000 for that car, which at the time was outrageous, but that was long ago. And I said, I'll never pay that much money again, because then I thought, what if I had put all that money into Microsoft stock? Mark, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Well, I can't talk either, Dave, because the most I've ever spent on a car is $12,000 too. Right. The only time I ever had a new car was in the mid 90s when I was in sales and I won a new car on a sales contest. I had to stay with the company to keep it, but I got to go to the lot and picked out a Pontiac Grand Am. And that was the only time I ever had a new car. And I'm the same thing. And I preach to everybody. Cars are a depreciable asset. Drive it off the lot is worth less, blah, blah, blah. Invest that money. So, I have to confess, I have a little bit of Dave in me, but not to the extent you do.
Oh no, I'm cheap, man. I'm cheap. I'm money caught. I always say, that could buy a building.
But hey, credit to you. You've been very good when it comes to investments in real estate, stock, everything. So I think you're a really good businessman. I respect that. But just keep in mind, when Dave talks money, you're talking to an extremist on money. So just keep it in mind.
So now you know how much that Yale tuition is killing me.
Yes, it's got to be killing you. I know it's got to be killing you.
I said, boy, I love my daughter. She could have gone to University of Toronto for a fraction of this money.
Yeah, and university and Yale at home is that's intolerable, right? Let's get back to to the Wildcats. 35,000 undergraduate students, 10,000 grad students. So this is a big school, about 50-50 by gender. They practice rolling admissions. As you now know, if you're a regular podcast listener, instead of allowing applications to pile on up and have a stack like regular admission schools do, and then send them all out on a common notification date, as applications roll on in, decisions roll on out. Now, one other thing to know about U of A. UA, like I said, sometimes called UA, sometimes U of A, both of them you'll hear for Arizona.
Increasingly, the preferred name for UA is U Arizona.
This is not a flagship that is extremely hard to get into. So there's an 86% acceptance rate. Almost 9 in 10 are getting in. So while it's a flagship, it's a lot different than a lot of your really competitive public schools like a Texas or a UC Berkeley, a Virginia, Florida, Georgia, a Michigan, UCLA, or most of the UCs that are really hard to get into for in-state students. And I say most of the UCs because mostly all of those schools are hard to get into, whether it's UCSD, San Diego, Santa Barbara, Irvine, Davis. They're all really competitive. It's not like that. They're taking almost 9 in 10 students. And the cost of attendance for in-state student is a tad under 30, and for out-of-state, it's about 50,000. 1 in 5 students stay on campus. So this is not a school that requires all freshmen to stay on campus. They strongly urge it. Like they'll say, our research shows higher retention, higher grade point average for students to stay on campus, but they don't require it. 70% of first-year students do live on campus, though. Now, as far as sort of some of the racial, socioeconomic diversity, 1.4% American Indian, Alaskan Native, 5.8% Asian, 4.2% Black African American, 28.8% Hispanic Latino. You'll find this, that racial demographics almost always reflect the demographics of the surrounding area. So Hispanic Latino population large in Arizona, so you're almost 30% Hispanic Latino. 4.9% multiracial, and 53.8% white, 8% international. And something now that Anika and I just finished discussing Pell Grants, I'm going to include a little bit more often with you because you guys understand what Pell Grants are. 26% Pell Grants recipients. So about 1 in 4 get the Pell Grant. Socioeconomic diversity is also really important. Want to start including that, not just racial diversity. Now, the Flandreau Science Center and Planetarium is a science museum and planetarium in Tucson, and it is part of the University of Arizona. And planetarium science is actually a really strong program that they have, especially on the graduate level. Another thing that U of A is known for is one of the strongest honors programs in the country, and also one of the largest honors programs in the country. When I say large, I'm talking about 5,500 students. That's huge.
Wow.
Some of the benefits of the Honors College include longer library checkout dates, cheaper printing options at the Sloan Acker House, priority registration, which is very important. You want to be able to get your classes. That's one of the biggest perks of honors. Additional honors advising, so specialized counseling, smaller classes taught by honors faculty, special clubs and organizations specifically only available to honors students, honor student council, honor student ambassadors, unique scholarship opportunities only for honors students, a whole honors living complex with all the bells and whistles, and additional honors theses is going to be required before graduation. Dave, you and I were talking off air about the value of these honors colleges.
Absolutely.
Right now.
Absolutely. Look, I'm asked all the time, are there really any differences between Ivy League colleges and your other schools? And, there really is not, especially when you look at all the honors colleges that so many flagship universities have to offer. Essentially, you're getting a very similar equivalent type of peer group of highly motivated, dedicated students who are going to go places. And when you look at the resources that universities that are 30, 40, 50,000 plus kids can throw at these honor courses in terms of smaller classes, scholarships, research opportunities, study abroad opportunities, in many, many cases, they are every bit the equal of everything that you can get from your most selective colleges. And to boot, they tend to be a double bargain. We talk about this, Mark, that Mark all the time has kids that get into Ivy League schools. You profiled one young man who got into Stanford and Wake Forest. And even though he could go to Stanford, it was full tuition, but Wake Forest was free. Plus, he got a special scholarship. He got all the bells and whistles. And more importantly, when he walked onto Wake Forest, they treated him like he was king. They were like, you are one of our special status. Whereas at Stanford, he was just another student. And at the end of the day, a top performing student at an honors college will, I guarantee you, have as many opportunities and be as successful as that student that went to an Ivy. So I'm a great proponent of the honors colleges, and I think they represent a tremendous bang for your buck and truly can get you any place you want to go to compared to other selective institutions.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan, so we agree 100% on that.
Yeah.
Another thing Arizona has, which is nice, are their cultural centers. So they have cultural centers. They're like large affinity groups and support centers for various affinity groups. So they have a women's and gender center, and these all come with facilities in staffing and programming. They have a LGBTQ center, an African American center, Native American center, Asian Pacific Islander center, Disability center, and Latinx and Hispanic center. One of the things Arizona started doing a while ago is aggressively recruiting out-of-state students with nice financial incentives, a lot like you've seen South Carolina, Alabama, a lot of schools doing that now, throwing merit money at students. They're actually 36% out-of-state. I'm going to say a little bit more about the merit money in a second. So that's kind of a lot, like almost 4 in 10 out-of-state. They've got a great tutoring program that's called Think Tank. Some of the complaints sometimes you'll hear, parking, students are not really pleased with the parking options, especially the free parking options. And you will hear students outside the honors program talk about the difficulty sometimes in getting into classes that they want. Some of the other things of note, they have a great program if you're undecided coming into college. That's perfectly okay. It's one of their largest actually majors is undeclared. And they have a whole ACE Center houses. They have a whole exploratory studies program for undecided majors. They also have something called Degree Search, which you can basically go on to their website and put in all your different interests, and it filters it out based on your subject interest and lets you know a major that lines up really well with your interests. And we have as many different majors that they have. It's kind of worth doing if you're not sure what you want to study. Another unique thing they offer is what's known as their 100% engagement, which is really cool. This is basically something that will actually show up on your degree. And it's a commitment to do experiential education when you're at Arizona. It could be a capstone project. It could be volunteer opportunities. It could be on-campus or off-campus internships. It could be a research project, but it's something you actually work with a faculty member with to customize and come up with a creative plan that's unique for you. And it shows up actually on your degree that you graduated and you had, through this 100% engagement option that they have. Arizona is a big research school. So it's one of 65 schools that is a member of AAU. And Dave, when I hear AAU, I think of gyms, balls bouncing in the gym.
Oh, go ahead.
Our regular listeners know that my daughter played AAU basketball from age 8 to 18, and I traveled all over the country on a super competitive team, the second-ranked team in Georgia for many of those years. At the end of the day, she decided not to play. She broke her leg between junior and senior year, and she had multiple offers, but her offers, she went from D1 down to D2 and D3, and she just didn't like the schools enough. And I'm actually happy, and so is she, that she decided not to play. So when I think AAU, I hear gyms bouncing, balls bouncing, crowded gyms, college recruiters everywhere. But AAU here refers to the American Association of Universities, and it's a group of 65 schools they really specialize in research. So you remember a while ago, Dave, when I said to you, you ever heard of a Research One University? Do you remember me asking you that on the air?
Yes. And that had to do with how many federal grants that they get to dedicate to research. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the name's actually changed now. So this is the Carnegie Foundation classification. They're now known as an RUVH, which stands for Research Universities with Very High Research Activity,
right?
Formerly known as R1s. And Arizona is absolutely one of them. They get $606 million a year in research funding.
Yeah.
And they get the fourth of most of any public school in the country when it comes to NASA research.
Right.
So just... for example, they just got $325 million in research for lunar and planetary laboratory. So it's a big research school and a strong concentration both on infectious disease research and on NASA, space, planetarium, that sort of thing. Over 40 different Greek organizations. And if you like school spirit, Arizona is a rah-rah school. Dave alluded to that earlier. The Wildcats, Pac-10. You like the crowds, you like the rah-rah, you like the buzz. They've got it. Basketball's the biggest one. Football also is big. Baseball, not too bad as well. They have a whole section, Dave, and they're known as the Zona Zoos.
That's right.
The Zona Zoo cheering section. 12,000 people, and they go nuts at every game.
Hey, man,
so,
this is dating myself, but didn't Steve Kerr go to Arizona?
Yes.
Steve Kerr
went there.
That's right, Steve Kerr. I remember the year he was playing. And
of course, you're Chicago, so he was a star with Michael Jordan and the Bulls. So
hit the last shot Kerr. in the last dance. Remember, Steve Kerr?
Yes. Steve Kerr was a Wildcat.
That's right.
23 dorms. They range from small dorms like 60 up to over 1,000. So you got a lot of range in dorms. Mentioned a few things about their admission process. A unique process where you actually self-report your own grades for up to 4 years. Similar to how the UCs work. And then at the end, when you've graduated, you submit your final transcript, but they go with your self-reported grades. Here's a big thing for a huge school like this. They're one of the largest schools in the country. That is test optional.
Wow.
Don't usually see huge schools be test optional. Now they have some exceptions. If you're applying to their nursing program, their architecture program, their engineering program, or their honors college, they will require tests. But unless it's nursing, architecture, engineering, or their honors program, test scores are not required. However, test scores we've talked about this a lot. If you want scholarship money, you're going to need test scores for that. I mentioned it in the start. They do assured admissions for Arizona residents. So an Arizona resident with a 3.0 in core academic classes is in.
Wow.
Shared admissions, you heard early in our admissions vernacular, guaranteed admissions. You don't have to worry about anything. You're 3.0 and you're in. Here's a thing that, Dave, you would love, man, Mr. Push Lincoln off the penny.
Guess what it is. Guess what it is.
Guess what? They guarantee coming in, tuition and fees will not go up for 4 years, 8 semesters. Whatever price you come in at, you can have confidence there will be no tuition and no fee increases. They lock you in.
Right.
Isn't that awesome?
That is awesome. And please keep in mind, folks, that we've been seeing tuition increases on the order of what, Mark? 6, 7, 8% per year?
Depends on the school. You know, they've come down more recently in the 3 to 5 range, but still, that really adds up.
It does.
I mean, Dave, take 3% of 80 grand. Like, that's over 90 by year 4.
That's right. That's right. You know,
even 3%.
That's right.
So yeah, it's cost of education is risen faster than the cost of healthcare. That's all I need to say. Say no more.
You're buying my Lincoln Navigator.
There you go. Scholarships. So they basically look at your core GPA, 9th, 10th, and 11th. They don't look at 12th at all. So they use the first 3 years. Every school's different. Some schools look at 10th and 11th only. Some look at 10th, 11th, 12th. They look at 9th, 10th, and 11th only. That allows them to do rolling admissions and admit you really early in the fall, though.
Yeah.
And so they look at your core GPA and your SAT scores. They use a grid system, and they have a chart. And you can see how much money you're going to get. And I'm going to post a link so you can actually look at how this works. You'll see, for example, if you had a 3.79 GPA and a 32 ACT, you'd get $13,000.
Yeah.
So let's say you're out of state, you're looking at 50. Okay, all of a sudden that 50 is now 37,000.
Right.
And there's additional money also for the honor scholarship. And the other thing I'll say is their admission deadline is actually for scholarships is June 1st. So if you're hearing this and you like it and you're a senior and you're undecided, you can still apply. You can still apply and you can get that scholarship money right up to June 1st. So that's the University of Arizona. Dave, any final comments?
Well, so just to clarify, if you are an honors student out of state, what can your expected total package be roughly going to Arizona?
Yeah, so you're starting out, it's about 49 right now for cost of attendance. Okay. I use cost of attendance meaning all in, every penny. That's personal, miscellaneous spending, entertainment, books, supplies, transportation, everything, right?
Yep.
So you're starting out at 49. You're taking 13,000 off that right away, taking you down to 36. And then there's also some specific honors scholarships there that can have you down at you're looking at 30 to 35, all in, every penny. So that's what you're looking at. And that's the cost of many in-state schools.
That's right.
For all in.
Right. So, I'm looking at the schools very comparable to the profile we did on UNC Asheville just a couple weeks ago. It's once again a solid school you don't have to be a stellar student. In fact, there's many times where you see students who may have struggled. Maybe they're B students, maybe they're less B students, and they often ask, what are my college choices? And this is a great one. For your weather winnies out there, you're getting great weather. You're getting a large school with a lot of choices in terms of where what you want to study. And if you are a good student, you have the option to go into a very solid honors college, which gives you a lot of options. And folks, Arizona's a great place to consider relocating and staying permanently, especially if you're from a cold weather climate. So I think it's a really great option. And not to mention, you're in the Pac-10, baby, with a great basketball.
Hey, I'm converting you on this weather stuff, man. Come on down to Georgia, Dave. We'd love to have you. We don't have to pay those salt taxes that Illinois is hitting you with those ridiculous real estate costs, man.
Well, you're making an argument, and my knees are becoming more receptive to them every year. So the spirit is willing, but the knees are weak.
There we go. There we go. Hey, the one thing I would point out, there's a difference when you look at like a UNC Asheville. That's what's known as one of the 29 public liberal arts schools. So they're like more of a 3,500, 3,700 size school. Yeah. So they're going to mirror more of like your private liberal arts colleges in size.
Yeah.
But most of your flagship schools have these honors colleges, and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
And they're worth checking out. So if you like Arizona and you're a senior, it's not too late to apply.
Yeah. Go Wildcats.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.